I'm your host, Sharon Sorensen, here to talk about why birds of a kind wear different colors. And those different colors sometimes create a real identification challenge for us in our own backyards. So let's get started. There are four reasons for different colors within a species. The first, whether the bird is a male or a female of its species. Now, some species are monomorphic, meaning that the males and the females look exactly alike. For instance, Carolina chickadees or black-capped chickadees, depending on where you live, tufted titmouse, Carolina wren, no problem with either of these. However, it becomes more complicated when the species are dimorphic, meaning the males and the females don't look alike. The northern cardinal, for instance, has a paler version of himself as his female counterpart. Likewise, the dark-eyed junco male is a nice crisp slate gray, while the female is a softer gray. Sometimes the females have just a slight difference in plumage that helps us recognize the sexes. For instance, in the downy woodpecker, the male has a red spot on the back of his head and the female doesn't. And among red-bellied woodpeckers, the male has red extending all the way to the base of his bill, while the female has a gray band across her forehead. The flicker is a little bit different in that both have a red chevron on the backs of their heads, while the male has a black mustache and the female doesn't. But all of these birds are easily recognized as the same species. There are just some slight variations between the sexes. But that becomes more complicated when the males wear such decorative plumage that they look quite different from the females, and all of a sudden we wonder if we have two different species. And we'll use house sparrow as an example. The male, for instance, has a gray cap, he has a white ring around his neck, he has a black bib, and this rusty patch behind his eye. The female lacks all of those head decorations. In fact, well, I guess you could say she has a pale ring around her neck, but mostly all she has is this sort of cream color eyebrow. And it would be easy to say that these birds are unrelated and that you have two different species. Same with mallards, for instance, and I know you've all seen them, and certainly the female looks so different from her male counterpart that we wonder sometimes if we'd see her alone, who she is. So why does Mother Nature do this? Well, let's think about it for a minute, and let's use the American goldfinch as an example. The male is such a gorgeous bird, and he's so bright, and he's just almost iridescent. He's so beautiful. Well, can you imagine if something that bright yellow were sitting on a nest? It'd be like a beacon for every predator around to, hey, come get me. So the female is simply multi-shades of green. But it does sometimes make identification a little more complicated. Similarly, indigo buntings, the males, oh my gosh, they're so gorgeous, they're so bright, they're almost iridescent, while the female is this little brown job with just a hint of blue, which, by the way, isn't always real visible, and you may think that she's just another sparrow. So, identifying her can cause you to scratch your head once in a while. It certainly has me. And probably the most dramatic of the dimorphic birds are the summer tanagers. The male, bright red, the female, olive green. So, second reason for different colors within a species is whether the bird is young or old. And by young, I mean hatch-year bird, whether the bird hatched in May or September. It's a hatch-year bird until January, and then it's something else, either a mature or immature or whatever, depending on the species. But these hatch-year birds often look like mom. So let's use the house finch for an example. Mom, well, she's this brown streaky little thing that doesn't have much going for her, apparently, but her mate is lovely with nice bright red, this male feeding his two fledglings. So the fledglings look very much like mom, except for this little tuft. And indeed, house finches do happen to have these little tufts when they're first out of the nest, but they rapidly disappear. And so, yes, the young look like mom. Same is true with cardinals. The young look like mom, with this one exception. Mom has a bright orange-red beak, while the youngster has a dark beak. It's black when it comes out of the nest and fades ultimately over months into something more like mom's. And then the ruby-throated hummingbird. How interesting their plumage is. This male, oh my goodness, with that stunning gorget. The female, well, she's pretty plain, like a good many other females. But then there's this hatch-year bird, and it has a combination of characteristics that could cause us pause. For instance, it has a forked tail. We all know that means male. But it also has white tips on the tail feathers, and we all know that means female. It also has a clear throat. Well, sort of. It has dots there. And so ultimately what we have here is a hatch-year male. So he will keep his forked tail, he'll lose the white spots, and he'll gain the red gorget, and by next spring he'll look like Dad. Sometimes the young resemble neither parent. So the eastern male towhee is a black-hooded bird, stunning, and his female is brown, where he is black, also a stunning bird. Might even argue that she's prettier than he is. But the youngster, well, my goodness, it has a striped breast. It has this plain head without any hood at all. It has a yellow eye instead of red, but it has white on the wings and outer tail feathers, so there's a clue. But what you really have to end up doing is seeing who's feeding it and or who it's hanging out with. Sometimes the young vaguely resemble their parents, like this male bluebird, eastern bluebird, that carries the sky on his back. What a beautiful bird. And his paler version, female. But their youngsters are all speckledy. So the blue wing feathers and the blue tail feathers help us know bluebird, but certainly they can cause us pause as we look at them and try to be sure, is that a bluebird? So the third reason for different colors within a species has to do with whether they are molting or molted. And we've already talked about the youngsters molting, but there's more to it than that. Most birds molt twice a year. They shed all of their feathers and grow all new feathers once a year, and then they may have a partial molt the second half of the year. So here's how that plays out. Breeding season requires a lot of energy. Feeding young, laying the eggs, building a nest, all that stuff takes tremendous amount of energy. And yet, at the same time, it causes a lot of feather wear as they go in and out of nests and in and out of nest cavities, scraping past vegetation that conceals the nest. They lose a lot of integrity in their feathers. But growing new feathers requires a lot of energy as well, so they can't do the two at the same time. So at the end of the breeding season, they molt. So this Carolina wren in August has had it. The feathers are in bad shape. A good many of them are missing. But if it's going to prepare for winter, it needs new feathers. And so these two birds are the same bird, but they may look dramatically different simply because the one has new feathers. So damaged feathers lack warmth. That's another reason why they need to molt in the fall so that they can prepare for winter. And damaged feathers hinder flight. So this great blue heron has a perfect set of flight feathers. And as a result, birds that are going to migrate long distances need new feathers. So why do birds molt? They replace worn feathers for better warmth and safer and stronger flight. And here's the third one, for breeding color. So the fourth reason that birds have different colors within a species is whether or not they have alternate or basic plumage. By basic plumage, we mean winter plumage, non-breeding. By alternate plumage, we mean summer plumage or breeding plumage. So think of it, basic as plain and alternate as fancy. Fancy in order to attract the opposite sex and have a successful breeding season. So let's look how this plays out with a goldfinch. They breed late in the season. They're the last to nest, typically in August. So he's gorgeous in August, but by September he's already starting to lose his gold color. By October he's pretty drab. He stays the same in November. By December he's starting to show just a little yellow on the shoulder. By January he's showing yellow on his chin and a little bit on his face. By February, he's getting black pin feathers in his head so that he will be able to grow his black cap. By March, he looks really ratty because he's getting new feathers here and there. They can't grow them all in at the same time. It takes weeks, maybe even a month. And so in April, he's starting to look a little bit better, but he's still full of all these gray splotchy stuff, and the black cap isn't there. But oh my gosh, give him another month, and he is gorgeous, and he will stay gorgeous through the rest of the summer. So there you have it, alternate plumage and basic plumage, the breeding plumage and the non-breeding plumage. A couple of other examples that may be even more astonishing. The male scarlet tanager in alternate plumage turns into this green bird in the winter, and this bird shows the scarlet tanager in transition with some red at the base of his tail, a little red on his shoulder and below his eye. So he's in the process of molting into basic plumage, and here he is in full basic plumage. We sometimes see male evening grosbeaks in the spring in their alternate plumage looking really, really gorgeous. And here you can see him in basic plumage. The top picture shows the male in transition, where you can still see a little bit of his red bib, and by comparison, the spring female. So again, it would be easy to confuse these as entirely different birds instead of the same bird in different plumages. So there you have it, 4 reasons for different colors within a species: male or female, young or old, molting or molted, alternate or basic plumage. It can be a real puzzle, but once you realize what these options are, it will certainly help you identify the birds in your own backyard. So I hope you've enjoyed 4 reasons for why birds of a kind wear different colors. And if you're interested in learning more about birds, I hope you'll consider some of my books, Birds in the Yard Month by Month, How Birds Behave, or Planting Native to Attract Birds to Your Yard. Or take a look at my website, birdsintheyard.com, or join me on Facebook for a daily dose of birds in the backyard and why they're doing what they're doing and the habitat they need. Thank you for joining me, and may you always have birds in your binoculars.